Hello everyone! Today we're going to be featuring the gimmick monster itself, or herself, or himself, whatever you want to call Georgia, the Tier 9 American Premium Battleship. This thing is an absolute monster of gimmicks, and it kind of seems like Wargaming just went crazy at the candy store and gave all the candies to the same ship. Before I start though, thank you guys always for the subscriptions and the follows on Twitch. I appreciate it a lot. Still grinding for that 100k on both the channels, and thank you guys for taking the time to support that, so I can make that giveaway happen in the end. The Georgia, it's standard with what's standard. The damage control party, that's standard American damage con, and then it's got a spotter plane, which is once again pretty damn standard. However, then we have some really strange things. Well, you saw me pop the speed boost, and that's actually a 15% speed boost. No, it's not the 8%, it's a 15%. And this of course elevates the Georgia into the fastest tier 9 battleship by far. Like, it's not even a competition. Even the Alsace that does 36.2 is no match for the Georgia that can do over 40 knots. Well, about 40 knots. I think it's 39.9 or something. So this thing is absolutely monstrously fast. And Wargaming didn't stop there with like all the bonuses they gave to this thing. It doesn't have standard heal either. Now, technically the heal, in the sense it's standard that the standard American heal, in the sense that it heals for 40% or 28 seconds, which is pretty common. And it heals for the normal amounts, which is, well, basically you heal 100% of dot damage, which is fire and flooding. You heal 10% of citadel damage, like all battleships, with very few exceptions. And you heal 50% of pen damage, pretty common across all battleships. However, it's got that Massachusetts reduced cooldown, which means if you run the premium heal, it's got a 40-second cooldown. If you build for, let's say, Jack of all trades and the flag, then we're talking what, something like 36, 30, maybe even 34. I can't remember how low. It might have been 34 seconds. It was something absurd. You can cut down that reload, I think, to about 36 seconds. The reload on your heal. So Georgia, even though it doesn't have the highest health pool, it's pretty squishy at tier 9 with 74k health, and it's got some issues with pretty thin armor and a fairly sizable citadel. It's still very, very sustainable, simply because you can just queue up one heal after another, and it just gives it so much extra survivability. Then we have the guns. This is, once again, it's kind of different from the rest in the sense that it's got 3 double turrets. This is only 6 guns, but these guns are 457 millimeters, which of course means that you overmatch 30 millimeters of armor, which means that you're very, very scary against cruisers, and of course, well, any sort of battleship giving you broadside. In fact, the penetration on this sustains really, really well, to the extent that at 15 km or very long ranges, you actually have better or the same penetration as the likes of Thunder, for example. In fact, when you go to really far ranges, I think it's 20 kilometers, you're matching the Musashi and Yamato in penetration. So these shells sustain pen extremely well. You will not struggle citadeling things with that thing, for sure. In terms of DPM though, you're pretty low. I mean, it takes, you're basically down there with, I guess, Sovietsky Soyuz in terms of DPM, but considering the dispersion, that's not really that big of an issue, because your dispersion is much better than the average. It does have some issues with only having six guns, of course. When you do get poor dispersion, you get screwed harder than most others, but in general, the dispersion is pretty juicy on the ship. You tend to land a couple of shells every time, and their damage is just scary. So the guns are, to put it simply, even though you only have 6 of them, the guns are great on the ship. They are very, very punishing because of accuracy, penetration. Shell velocity isn't the best. That's an American thing. Shell velocity isn't the best, but it's not really that big of an issue because, well, the lack of shell velocity you make up by having insane velocity on your ship instead. The other gimmick, adding to this line of gimmicks that we have here, finishing off the Smolensk always feels good. He's a huge threat because, of course, he can burn us pretty damn hard, just like he can burn every ship in the game. The other gimmick that this thing has is that it actually has insanely good secondaries. It's got a ton of them. It's kind of like a Massachusetts on crack in that sense. The secondary DPM on this thing, let me actually look this up so I'm not talking out of my... The secondary DPM on the Georgia is 270k. Now, to put that into perspective, Iowa and Missouri have 190. Now, of course, it's more than just DPM. It's the fact that you got really scary range on it as well, which means you can actually build a ship for long-range secondaries. 9.5 very easily, and if you even build Philly for it, you can make it just a full-on secondary monster. So this thing is ridiculous. This thing is absolutely ridiculous when it comes to secondary power as well. Amusingly though, it's actually not that good at brawling, like sustained brawling, mostly because, well, you will see some examples of the squishy armor and the large citadel, which means that the ship excels generally at mid-ranges. You don't want to be going completely in, but when you do commit, when you do decide to charge in, this thing is really rough to deal with secondaries blazing on all sides and coming at you at 40 knots with these huge guns that are terrifying. The turret traverse isn't that super fast though. You don't have any Kremlin magical turrets. The turret traverse is 45 seconds, which is another reason to play it a bit more at mid-range than at close range, because if you're forced into brawls, well, you can struggle. Poor Des Moines, trying to angle against these shells, as I mentioned. Des Moines is 27mm plating. These things overmatch all the way up to 30mm because of the massive gun caliber. So in general, in the Georgia, you just want to take pot shots at cruisers. Regardless of how much angling they're doing, you just want to take shots at them. You can punish pretty much all of them. There are some exceptions, but most of the time you're going to be just dealing massive damage across the board. Of course, build-wise, you do want to run the increased speed module, consumable duration, because, well, when you got that incredible speed boost that gives you 15%, you want it active all the time, because, well, you just become this absolute speed demon. At this point, I'm deciding it's time to charge in. I've gotten rid of the Smolensk, I bullied the Des Moines away, so this is the time to push in and see if I can maybe get rid of this Musashi and this Sovietsky Soyuz. I'm angling against the Sovietsky and I'm trying to get rid of this Musashi so we can't blap my broadside. Because as I mentioned, the broadside on this thing is quite squishy. However, the Musashi's guns are turned away and I can't get the angle that I'm looking for, and I think the Sovietsky is actually going to get broadside, so we're going to see if we can do some damage to him. However, at this angle, we're just bouncing, whereas look what happens when Sovietsky shoots back. Yep, that was 23,000 damage through that angle. So, and as I mentioned, the armor on this thing really isn't that good. You can eat a huge amount of chunk damage left, right and center in those kind of brawling situations. I finally closed the distance close enough that he can no longer angle fully against my front guns, and that massive AP damage does delete him with a couple of citadels. But that costs us a fair bit of health, and Carrier chimes in with some torpedoes as well. Now, the Carrier is not going to have too much of a fun time trying to drop the Georgia, because once again, when you have a lot of secondaries, you tend to have a lot of AA as well. Not quite as good as what the Missouri or the Iowa has, but the AA on the Georgia is pretty damn good. And especially on a Carrier, then I think... No, it is a tier 10 Carrier, so if he really wants to kill me, he can absolutely give me a hard... No, never mind. Sorry, my bad. It's a tier 8 Carrier. Then he's not going to be able to do much. Tier 10 Carrier can absolutely bully the Georgia. Tier 8 will struggle to deal too much to you. Des Moines is angled, it looks like he's giving broadside once again. I don't really care how much he angles, all I want to do is hit him. Because, well, Georgia doesn't care about armor. Georgia really doesn't care about armor. Planes are coming from behind the island, so I'm wondering, is the Carrier actually hiding up there? I put the sector reinforcement on that side the planes are coming from, and of course to give as much broadside to the bombers as possible to make it slightly more difficult for him to land any good strikes on me. On the big ships like the Georgia, he won't have too many issues, but I'm trying to make him cost as many planes as possible when he does it. You see that he does get his strike through though, even as a tier 8, so you can imagine what a tier 10 can do to you. Still though, as long as we're dealing with tier 8s, we don't have too many issues, and with that fast reloading heal, he's not going to be able to take us down before we can hunt him down in return. Georgia, you want to avoid those brawls for the reasons I mentioned, unless you see opportunities. And Georgia is a very opportunistic battleship. You see an opening, you can be in that battle so damn fast because of that speed boost. And that is exactly what I saw. I saw an opening, a chance to go in there and brawl and bully, and as soon as I took it, it's very hard to stop me. With the fast reloading heal, with the speed, with the secondaries, with everything. The only way to kill you, to stop you, is to kill you. Oh man, that AP Alpha. That AP Pen and AP Alpha is just disgusting on this thing. Combined with the dispersion. It's only 4 front guns, but when you land 3 out of 4 hits and do 16k damage, it doesn't really feel that bad, does it? Georgia is absolutely one of those ships that I think is overpowered. I don't know why Wargame decided to give it so many of the goodies, but with the help of these goodies, 4 shells, yikes. So that was the end of that carrier. The Lexington did not have time to run. Note that you wouldn't be able to do that to a tier 10 carrier because they get that armored deck, which will easily bounce your AP without any issues. But as long as we're dealing with tier 8s, we have absolutely no issues. Huge lead, of course. Georgia shells are slow, but if you played American battleships before, this is not something new to you. In fact, that wasn't even enough of a lead. It was just short. We catch him with 1 pen, but not quite as much damage as we would have liked. Speed boost is about to run out, so we're going to be slowing down significantly, trying to push into this flank. I'm of course trying to catch them as they're trying to push into our spawn. I'm trying to get the broadside on them, but no such luck. Ibuki, same thing. We don't care the angles, we just shoot every time we get the chance. Overall, people ask me, should I get Shanbart or Georgia? I think Georgia is just straight up the better ship. Shanbart is a bit easier, because, well, you just point nose in and click. But I think Georgia has much bigger carry potential. And overall, I think Georgia is just a better ship out of the two of them. The ship is a monster. The ship is absolutely a monster. And if they're going to go through with this upcoming, for those that didn't notice, Wargaming is talking about an upcoming IFHE change and a cruiser armor change, where they're buffing cruiser armor very slightly, giving many of them 30mm central plating. If they do that, well then, the difference in power between Georgia and the likes of Shanbart, Missouri, Iowa is going to be just gigantic, because being able to overmatch 30mm is so important when you're dealing with angled ships. So I think the Georgia is really powerful now, and if those changes go through, it's going to be even more powerful. So pretty damn safe choice in that sense. You see the secondaries opening up on this Monarch. I'm not spec for IFHE, so I'm not going to have the pen, but we will be starting fires. Going a fair bit of broadside. Nah, I did angle in and he didn't get the hits he wanted. Monarch dispersion, of course, is hilariously dreadful. Sadly, that ship is not in a very good spot. I could use some help. Slowing down so I can get the cap here. Secondaries finish him up. Another ribbon to add to the collection. Slowing it down just enough that we get the cap. And now that we have the cap, now we're going to full speed into the enemy flanks as they're trying to push in through our spawn. This is, of course, if you do push, that's something to keep in mind. If you do decide to push a flank on this map, on Two Brothers, you need to be fast in order to catch the enemy. If you don't have speed, for example, if I was something like Colorado right now, I would be heavily considering just going straight down the middle, simply because I'm too slow to chase fast ships. But if you take the shortcut, you can intercept them and you will probably be more useful. Or although, biggest issue on Two Brothers is very slow ships like Yamatos and Musashis. These are like 27, 28 knot ships, going around the border and very slowly crawling their way around the border and around the map, and never really getting to do that much during the game. That's why the more skilled you are, the more you will benefit from the speed. And Georgia, as I mentioned, very fast ship, so it allows you to reposition very quickly. Of the fast heal also, and the reliable guns means that in the hands of a skilled player, the ship is actually quite a nightmare. I bump into the sinking Monarch as I'm tunnel visioning on trying to get rid of this Ibuki, because I expect him to actually be torping quite a bit, and that expectation turns out to be true. My Shanbart wasn't quite as expectant of these, and he gets caught full broadside by these Ibuki torpedoes. And IGN torpedoes, even though they don't have the best concealment, they actually hurt a fair bit. Turret traverse, as I mentioned, slow. We are dealing with slow turrets. I want to blap this full broadside, but it's going to take us a while. This is where the likes of, for example, Alsace does have a significant advantage, or Sovietsky Soyuz with Sovietsky Soyuz has 30, Shanbart has 36. This thing has 45, then you add in reload module, and it becomes even worse. But on the other hand, accuracy and penetration tends to make up for it. Trying to see if I can catch this Minotaur before he runs off. Ibuki is caught humping the border though. I want to see if I can maybe catch this Minotaur. But it doesn't appear, so we're gonna try to finish off this Ibuki so he can't reset us and he can't get any more torpedo volleys in on our team. He disappears from vision, but I pop spotter plane to get a bird's eye view. I know that he was humping the border, so I expect him to actually glide along the border, probably turning left right around now, so I'm aiming at the border at citadel height. And we get overpens on the first volley, but the second volley lands right on his citadel. And we get a blind fire kill on the Ibuki as well as the Kraken. Now, blind firing in general is a skill that is highly useful in this game. It's also one of the most difficult skills because it requires a lot of experience and understanding of the game. I am actually working on a blind fire guide. I've been collecting clips from different ships and different situations, so that's something I'm going to be posting at some point. Basically a super unicum guide to blind fire because it is so very, very terrifying. I catch the Minotaur trying to run away from us with, once again, another Citadel. And that was actually our 6th kill of this game. Gives us Confederate. I'm running Halsey, of course. If you got Halsey, running him on Georgia is amazing because he buffs your reload a fair bit. So we got 6 kills and only 1 ship remaining, which is the Gearing. I'm trying to hunt him down. We got 3 caps to his 1, and he's kind of pretty much cornered. So I don't really think he's going to have too much of a hope of getting much done here. Our carrier dies, but we still have a plane around, which can probably just go spot him. That is, of course, the fun part about carriers. Even if you kill them, they don't stop being a threat at all, because the planes will be hovering around and will be taking their vengeance. Planes go north, scouting. I have switched to HE, of course. HE on the ship hurts quite a bit, but in general you don't want to be using it except on anything really except DDs. Even nosing battleships, you can just use the AP on the superstructure to get those massive penetration and damage hits on it. Georgia Gearing gets spotted. I think he was trying to YOLO the Lion, but he missed the torpedoes or didn't get as many as he wants. And the Lion finishes him off with a quick volley. This game ends. Let's see, we have only a 188k damage game, but I kind of enjoyed this game because it showed many of the issues, both the advantages and the disadvantages this ship has. Consistent guns, speed, heal, secondaries, AA. These are all great, but on the other hand, also you got squishy armor and a fairly low health pool, and even when very angled against the Sovietsky Soyuz, he could black me for 23,000 damage, which is basically a third of your health. So you don't want to overcommit to brawling in this thing. It can work, but it's absolutely not one of the strengths of the ship. Mid-range is where you want to be playing the Georgia. If you go low, you can always disengage to long range, because you got the speed, you got the heal. On the other hand, when you're playing mid-range, if you sense an opening, you sense an opportunity, then you can dash in and brawl, just like I did there. That's why I think Georgia is one of the best suited, like, agile mid-range battleships, because you can at any point, if you take too much pressure, disengage. If you find an opening, charge in. But the biggest mistake Georgia players do is either they play too safe, too far back, or they just go full YOLO and they just melt. Because even with the fast reloading heal, we're talking 74k health and not a whole lot of armor. It's classical American battleship armor, which is a whole lot of 32mm, a bit of 38 on the deck, and not really that much armor on the Citadel, with no turtleback, of course. And not much in the terms of torpedo protection. I think the Georgia has 26% torpedo belt, which compared to something like Alsace with 44 or Musashi with 55 is really not that much. It's the same as you have on the Lion and the Iowa, and neither are exactly infamous for being torpedo resistant. Team score wise, 3.1k base, 6 kills, 8 planes shot down. A pretty comfortable carry in a tier 10 game. Luckily, only tier 8 carrier in this one. It can be difficult if they target you, but general carriers don't really like targeting the Georgia too much because you're very fast. So getting torpedoes in isn't really that easy, and combined with the good AA, you're not really the juiciest target. However, if they catch you when you're fighting someone else or forced to sit nose in because a battleship is aiming at you, then you're quite easy to take down because of that lack of health. Detailed report, 56 shells, 176k damage. That speaks for the consistency of the AP, a high average damage per shell. 75 secondary hits, didn't really do a whole lot. 3 fires, they didn't do too much either. So mostly the bread and butter is the main guns. You can build it for secondaries, as I mentioned, but I feel like it's a bit of a wasted potential. If you want the meme though, Georgia's running in with secondaries can be hilarious. Damage received wise, the AP was the big deal. A bit of torp, a bit of bombs, a bit of everything, but not as much damage as we could have taken. But then again, we did take a lot of chunk damage in the early fight. The issue is, of course, that you got standard heal, so you can only heal 50% of standard pens. Even though it reloads fast, it doesn't mean you're going to be able to use all of those heals, especially if you eat citadels. Anyways, let me show you guys my recommended build for this ship. Alright, as usual, let me start with the modules. Nothing much to talk about here. If you got the money, well, you should have. If you're playing the Georgia, you should be able to afford that. Run the premium damage control, premium heal, premium speed boost, and premium spotter plane in that order. Upgrade wise, secondary survival. I actually don't think you need main battery survival because they're so well armored and the armor plating is angled. Whereas, as you saw, the secondaries can be useful, especially if you build for them in any way, and it helps your AA stay alive, which will always become an issue, of course. Speed boost module. The speed boost is, as I mentioned, amazing. A 15% boost, and increasing it by a whopping 50% for just one consumable or one upgrade is absolutely worth it. I also run the secondary battery mod to make these secondaries even more useful because, well, I don't really trust too much in the flak, especially with 75% accuracy. So I prefer buffing the guaranteed benefit, which is the secondaries. Tankiness. Note that you can run maneuverability instead of tankiness because the rudder shift is pretty poor on the Georgia, but in this age of Smolensk and such, I'm not sure you want to. And finally, of course, the improved dispersion on the main battery guns for obvious reasons. The guns are kind of the bread and butter of this gimmicky thing, and they are very strong. You want them to hit where you aim. Captain perks wise, I'm actually running the very standard. If you got Halsey, he's of course amazing, but I'm running a standard battleship captain, which is priority target, adrenaline rush, superintendent, fire prevention, concealment expert, expert marksman, expert loader, and a jack of all trades. Note that if you have the improved expert marksman, you can cut down this turret traverse from that nasty 45 seconds to 36, which is basically what I think Sean Bart has. So a significant buff, and absolutely worth running if you can afford it. The ship benefits greatly. There are some options you can run here, of course. You could build for secondaries and such things, but as I mentioned, I like the flexible builds and I like the versatile builds, and this is a tanky build that has both the option of kiting away or closing in, and it has the survivability to get away with it. I like the jack of all trades build. You will probably see people recommend all sorts of secondary gimmicky builds, and that's fine. They can work, they can be strong, but I don't think they are nearly as flexible as this one, because they require you to get into a situation where your secondaries are firing and you're not getting killed in order to be effective, whereas this build will always be effective. Flag wise, standard battleship flags, which is reduction in fire, reduction in flooding duration, heal, speed, especially on Georgia, faster consumables, and the AA flag. And because Georgia has such good secondaries, I do recommend adding the secondary flag on the ship as well. The detonation flag I just run because, well, I don't like to detonate when I'm making commentaries or trying to record videos. Anyway, that was all for me. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will talk to you guys next time.